Steven, hey man, welcome to the Income Flip.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Man, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm a passionate advocate of anybody that's helping people build wealth through real estate. And as I was learning a little bit about your background and understanding your journey, like I know you're passionate about that as well. And so, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you live and also, you know, you got a new book that just came out. Like I'd love to learn a little bit about that. And what we'll do is we'll deep dive and kind of create some context for our audience on your journey. But where are you from?
Absolutely. So I'm from Elon, North Carolina. So for people that don't know, that's situated between Greensboro, North Carolina, and Raleigh. So really the Piedmont Triad of North Carolina.
Awesome. Are you from Elon originally?
I am. I am. So I grew up in Elon in Alamance County, went away for a few years for college, but then came back and really grew the roots here and love this area. It's situated between the mountains. You can get to the mountains in 3 hours. You can get to the beach in 3 hours. So best of both worlds.
We're gonna deep dive a little bit at some point into just what real estate looks like there, right? That's always a cool thing to explore. But I wanna understand your story, right? Um, let's go back. What got you on this journey to start with?
Yeah, so I grew up. My parents were entrepreneurs; they were blue collar workers. They owned landscaping business, and so I knew I wanted to own something. Right? It was just really instilled in me at a very young age, and I went away, went to High Point University for college, and my senior year, I took a real estate class there, and the professor owned real estate in Chicago, and he was looking at expanding his real estate down in North Carolina. And so, really, the class, what they taught you were, you had to buy an apartment complex and make it profitable the first year. And that was kind of the project in the class. And so, if you did that, you passed. If you didn't do that, you didn't get a good grade.
Can
And
I time
so,
out real fast? That is such a cool class.
yeah,
Like that is such a valuable class. Oh my
yeah.
God. I
Yeah,
wish I
so
had that
you're
class.
getting real life experience, but not in real life, right? I mean, you're finding out what you need to know and the different things you need to know about real estate. And so, I fell in love with real estate then, and so that was back in 2010. It took several years for me to actually get into real estate, and I was talking to my parents, and I said, I really want to get into real estate. And my dad knew a local investor here in town that he said, hey, you know what? Here's his phone number. Give him a call. Ask whatever questions you might ask or whatnot to kind of find out whether or not you really want to do this. And so I linked up with him. His name's Joel, and he's still my mentor to this day. So he says, Stephen, for one, I've had 10, 15 people come to me over the course of the last 10, 15 years, and they all want to do what you're saying you want to do. And not one actually did what they wanted to do. And so he said, I'm not going to spend a ton of time. I want to see that you're engaged. I want to see that you're committed. And he told me about a book called Building Wealth by Russell Whitney. And so the
Hmm.
book was originally published, I think, in the 90s and then republished in the early 2000s. And so I bought this book. And so he said, you know what, start reading that and, we'll talk more. And so I started reading it. And this book really taught you how to do the game of real estate with little to no money down, and you're able to use the bank's money to continue to roll into other deals. And so I started reading that, and I went back to Joe and I said, Joe, like this is something I really want to do. And he said, okay. He said, so let's start talking. These are the things you need to do. And he really kind of outlined that for me. And this was 5 years removed from High Point University. So I was scared. Before I
Hmm.
met Joel, I didn't know what direction I wanted to go. I thought you had to have money, and I thought you had to be well connected to get into real estate. And you don't really necessarily need either one of them if you know where to look. You can always use someone else's money to get in. And so Joel really started helping me with that. And then fast forward a decade, several hundred rental units later, I loan money. I flip houses now. Just wrote a book called The New American Dream that talks about my journey and to help people, very similar to the book that I read when I first got into this business. And so it's kind of crazy how life works. I never in a million years would have ever dreamed it would have materialized to what it is today because I just wanted some secondary income. And then, I still remember growing up, I would, there was those computer games like Roller Coaster Typhoon Lagoon and where you would build your own theme park And it was kind of like kind of entrepreneur game, but it was for kids. And I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And that's the cool part is
That's
I've
awesome.
seen this dream kind of become a reality over the last decade.
And the truth is, you're really just getting started, right? Like a couple hundred doors, that's a lot of doors, right? Like people would retire and say, look, like we're calling that was a great career. And 10 years is not a long time, although it sounds like a long time.
Right.
You're a young guy. Like you've got another 30, 40 years in you, right? Or more to build this thing if you want to build it, right? Depending on like what your long term. So, but it takes time, and people don't understand, hey, it does take time to build wealth. You listen to Gary Vee or you listen to Warren Buffett or like anything good takes time. I'm curious, what was your first investment?
So my first investment, I bought two different properties. It was two different properties I bought from Joel. My strategy is you buy the worst house on the block and you make it the best because there's so much upside to buying the worst. You help out your community, you get a better deal on it, especially if it's more cosmetic things. A lot of people cannot look past cosmetic issues. And so for me, I had that eye. I was like, you know what? A hole in the wall here or a busted window here, a messed up light fixture there, all that's simple, easy fixes that don't take a lot of money to get, but I was able to get a good buy on it. And so bought two different houses, worst house on the block. I didn't have any money. And so I had to get 15% for my 15% down. And so what I did, I used a credit card. There was a credit card I had that would do a cash advance on it. Now, don't get me wrong, this was 10 years ago. So the interest rate was 7%, where that same credit card this day is about 25%. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend today using a credit card, but there's so many hard money lenders, private lenders out there that can do the same thing. They kind of act the same. And so I used that money, bought the property, went in and increased my sweat equity, went in and fixed the cosmetic issues. And then I took the property right back to the bank and refinanced it. So I pulled my sweat equity back out. Now the property is worth more. I was able to pay the credit card off for the down payment money and pay the credit card off for the amount of money that I spent on the repairs. And so now I don't have any of my own money tied up in it. And then the money I had left over, I rolled into the next deal. And so I tell people to this day, I don't have any of my own money tied up in any of this because I've always used the bank's money and I use my money for other things. And so it's a pretty cool game you get to play if you do it the right way. And let me tell the audience, don't go spend that money on a brand new car or a boat or anything like that. That will sink the ship the fastest. You want to roll that into an appreciating asset that's going to make you some money over time.
100%. So whenever you're building a machine like this, you need two sides, right? You need what I call 30, 60, 90-day money. People need to live, right? And you need to start building and accumulating assets. Like it sounded like you did a cash out refi, you took that money, you bought another asset, and you just rolled it. It's snowball. But how are you making your 30, 60, 90-day money? How are you paying your everyday bills?
Yep. So I was a retail store manager at the time. So at this time, I was $75,000 in debt. So I had about $60,000 in student loan debt, and I made a great decision before I got into this as a 22-year-old to buy a brand new car. So I financed a car, which not a great investment.
Big old truck. You bought a big old truck, I'm sure.
And so I'm $75,000 in debt, making $45,000 a year, and scared half to death. I was like, first of all, this isn't sustainable. Not making enough money, especially with the student loans and the debt. I was still living at home because I didn't make enough money to even go rent an apartment anywhere or buy a house, for that matter, until I started to figure out what rental property was really about. And that all changed when I met Joel and when I read the book, and it's just been so great since then. But I knew that, I initially just wanted secondary income. But then, once you start doing this and you start seeing everything build and you start seeing the money come in and you start seeing your net worth go up. I mean, my net worth started with a negative. I had negative in front of it. So once you start getting to positive, and then it got to $1 million and $2 million, I mean, it's it's almost like a drug where it's like, you know what, like I'm addicted to this a little
Well, it's a
bit
game. It's
because
that
it's
roller
fun.
coaster game. If it's that
Yeah.
roller coaster game that you're playing, no, it's fun. It's a game. Um, so when did you decide to go full time, Stephen?
So I was about 35 units in. So I had been doing it a couple years. I was still working the retail store management job to have that income. And it took me a couple months to finally get up enough courage to say, you know what, I'm going to do this thing full time.
Got it.
Because there again, I tell people this all the time, anything that's worth or valuable in life, you got to get out of your comfort zone to get it.
Hmm.
And so you sometimes you got to bet on yourself or take a chance. And this was obviously a calculated chance or risk or whatnot because I already had 30 some units and it was worth several million. And, so I could have done it probably a little bit sooner, but there again, our minds play a little bit of mind tricks on you that anything new, it's scary. Oh, can I do it? Because you've
Hmm.
never done it before. But once you start to do it, like I don't even think about when I buy a house now, can I make the mortgage payment or is this a good deal because I have the experience? But when you first start, your brain's like, whoa, this is something new. You're supposed to be scared. Maybe you're not supposed to do this. There's just so much doubt there, right? But go for it if this is what you really want to do because I'm telling you, if you don't, you're going to be kicking yourself 5, 10 years from now.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, in we teach this 7 level framework, and level one is always about thinking. It's mindset, energy, identity, because it's all those voices in your head that tell you the things that are just lies. Right
Mhm.
now, you're it's there because it wants to protect you, right? And as long as you surround yourself, what I heard is you surrounded yourself with a mentor that was a good guide, right? And you're a good student and you just kind of follow the formula. This is a formula. You follow the formula, it works. So I'm curious, in your formula, were they all single family houses? Were they a mix of multis and singles? Like what was the buy box?
Yep. So it was a multiple of different things. So I started out with single family homes. Then I went to duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and then small little apartment buildings. And what I mean by that is 10 units or less. And so
Yeah.
it's been great. I absolutely love. I'm not afraid of a single family house. I'm not afraid of a small little apartment complex or anything in between. For me, it's all about the numbers. And so
What
I know a
numbers
hot.
the numbers today obviously look different because of where interest rates are, right? And so we'll unpack that in a bit. But over the last 10 years, as you were building this portfolio, and good job for building the portfolio over the last 10 years, right? What was the financial box you were looking at? What would the numbers look like in your
Yeah.
area?
So, for me, I initially wanted some secondary income. But, I said, you know what, if I can make $300 per unit after payment, taxes, insurance, repairs, I'm going to be sitting very good. And
Hmm.
so for me, that's really the standard that I used. I didn't focus as much on what interest rates were or what obviously, you make the good deal is at the buy. Where you make
Hmm.
all your money on a property is when you buy it, not when you sell it. When you
Hmm.
sell it, you realize the great deal you got when you first bought it. But, for me, it was all about those numbers. What am I going to net at the end of the day? Because I didn't want to just net $50 or $100 because if the market somehow went down or whatnot, I would be, then relying on other income. And if I was looking at doing it full time, there wouldn't be another income to rely on. And so for me, I always wanted to be very strict about that. Whenever I was running the numbers of, hey, here's what it's going to cost to buy it. Here's my repairs. This is what the size of the loan is going to be. Let me minus out my payment, taxes, insurance, and then put in a good 25, 30% worth of expenses. And you know what? I want to net $300 a month. Now, don't get me
Hmm.
wrong. This was 10 years ago, much different market. It would be much harder to net $300 today if you're getting in today. And so maybe the mindset's changed just a little bit from that standpoint. But for me, that's what I looked at when I first got into it.
I, as you were going through this journey, you had to start finding money, right? You get the 10 loans, 11 loans, 15 loans, 20 loans, right? How did you develop uh, your financing? Was it a local bank? Were they private lenders? Unpack that a little bit.
Absolutely. So my mentor Joel, he really helped me. He introduced me to the first banker I ever did business with. I still do business with that banker to this day. He said, stay away from big banks, utilize your local hometown banks. And he said, the properties you're looking at, he said, especially for single family homes, he said, most bigger banks want a certain dollar amount. They want a much, they want a house you're going to physically live in, which is a little bit different than what a rental property might look like. And so he really helped me develop what those relationships with bankers look like. And so for me, it was hometown banks. I would talk to presidents or vice presidents of those banks because they're the ones making the decisions. Even though a lot of these banks now have loan committees and people that it's a network of people that decide whether or not you get the loan instead of just one person. But for me, when I first got in this business, I was like, oh, a banker, that's scary. A banker has all this power and all of this, and it's really not that way. He said, Stephen, make sure you look at this as a two-way interview. He said, they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. And he said, let me explain that. He said, their job is to loan money. If they don't loan money, they lose their job. I mean, that's what a banker does. But if they loan money to the wrong person and you don't make your payments, they also lose their job. And so they got to make sure it's a good deal, but they're there to loan money. He said, but your role in all that is you have to make sure you like working with the person, right? Mm-hmm. So like you're interviewing them, you're interviewing the bank as much as they're interviewing you, because this is somebody you're going to talk to for the next 10, 15, 20 years of your life. And if you don't like talking to them, well, that's not going to be very fun, right? Because, with the amount of stuff that the banks ask these days, you're talking to them on a monthly basis or at least once a quarter. And so he said, you want to make sure it's two-way there. And so it was great. The way that first deal happened, my mentor had called the banker initially and said, hey, Stephen's coming down. This is his background. This is what his credit is. This is how much he makes.
He vouched for you.
Yeah, exactly. Vouch. Yep.
That's
and
cool.
So it was really a handshake. He said before he pulled any of what I was telling him to make sure it was correct, he was taking my word for it, and it was a handshake. Hey, you're approved for the loan. He said, as long as you're telling me the truth, obviously I got to go look at it. But obviously I was telling him the truth. And so that makes this business so much easier. And when you bank at a bigger bank, you're a number to them. It's a lot harder to get these loans, where if you stay more local, it's much easier. And so, when you start talking about, hard money lenders and private lenders, that sort of thing, I didn't know nearly as much about that 10 years ago. That it's really kind of happened over the last several years. I've become much more conversed with that. But awesome. For me, I started with the local hometown banker.
Okay. So just to kind of unpack this, he got a mentor. That mentor helped him get over some drunk monkeys. That's what we call it, when like these limiting beliefs are like whispering in your ear. Then he got a good banker, local banker, and built a relationship. Like, this is a relationship game, right? One of the biggest challenges, Stephen, for people is that they understand the numbers. They understand they need to try to make them work, but they have a hard time finding deals, right? What was your approach, and what has been your approach to finding deals in your market? How do you do it?
Right. So for me, I always tell people the best deals aren't going to be the most obvious ones. So you can go to MLS listings, you can go to realtor listings. Normally, once it gets with a realtor, they want retail value. And anybody that's got a little bit of experience in the rental business, if you're paying retail value for every single one of your deals, you're not going to make a lot of money at the end of the day. I mean, you need it at a discounted rate. And so for me, when I first got in this business, I would tell any and everybody that would listen, hey, I want to buy a rental property. So I was telling realtors, I was telling investors, I was telling property managers, just in case they ran across an off-market deal, or before they would list it on the MLS listings that they might want to sell off-market. So everybody knew I was looking for it. I would look on Craigslist. I would look on Facebook Marketplace. I would ride around to neighborhoods and find the worst house on the block and do the research to find out who owned it, and called them, hey, do you want to sell it? I see, the yard's a mess, or I see it might need some work. And all that paid off. And so now I get 5, 10 calls a week. Hey, do you want to buy this property? And so, obviously it's kind of that analogy where, you got to push the ball of snow up the hill. But at some point, once you crest the hill, it's going to be a huge ball of snow coming down the hill, and it's all going to pay off for yourself. And so I wasn't getting that many calls back then, but now I am. And still to this day, there's not a lot of great deals on MLS or that are listed with realtors. But if you go to these off-market sites and get your name out there, you can still find some good deals depending on what market you're in.
Stephen, are you then just relying exclusively on your network? You're not doing direct mail. You're not making phone calls. Is it all just your referral network?
That's right. So,
fantastic.
Yep, all these people have my numbers. I get people call me that I don't even know who they are. They're like, "Hey, so and so gave me your number, and I'm looking at selling this." And it's just time after time of just telling people, "Hey, I'm looking at buying real estate."
Sure. And then I'm sure having a good reputation, you follow through with what you said you were going to do, right? And so people know that they come back to you.
That's right.
That's awesome. So what does the business look like today? You said you have a couple hundred doors. Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
And they're mainly small. Like if you do have quads, there's not like a 50 unit building in there or 100 unit. It's kind of like smaller multis, probably under 10. Is that right?
That's right.
Probably what you find in your market. I would imagine a lot of what you find in your market. What's 10 years ago? I'm just curious. What could you buy a duplex for? And today, what can you buy that same duplex for?
Well, I still remember I bought, tell you a crazy story. I started doing some kind of cost analysis out of 401k coming out of the retail management job that I had. And I said, you know what, I'm only getting 5-6% on this return. And I ran across a duplex that was $35,000. And so I was like, you know what? I'm getting 5-6% on my 401k. If I took this money out, I'm going to take the 50% hit. I can go pay cash for this duplex. This duplex is going to make me somewhere between $1,200-$1,300 a month then. And this was years ago. And I did that. And so within 1 year, I got the 50% of the fee that I had to pay to get out of my 401k. And then I also made back my money. That same duplex to this day is worth about $250,000, and I'm making about $2,500 a month on it. And so people back then said, "You're absolutely insane for cashing out a 401k." And I said, "Well, here's the thing. 401k is so manipulated from the standpoint it's in someone else's control. Yeah. I don't get to control what happens other than what stock I invest in. This real estate, I have a lot more control over it. I can control the tenants. I can control my rents. It's going to appreciate over time. So really, I'm getting a double win. It appreciates over time, but then I'm also getting in the monthly rent. And so it's been an absolute home run for me. I still remember, to take that a step further, there was a town north of where I'm at. Properties were selling for under $10,000. And so I had a lady, really man and woman, the husband and wife, they said, we have 5 properties we want to get rid of. I'll let you buy this one for $2,000, this one for $5,000, this one for $7,000. And I think 2 other ones were like $8,000 and $9,000. Those same properties today are worth $150,000 to $200,000 now. And so it's just nuts. I've had people give me lots. So where I lived at in certain parts of town, you couldn't it was hard to even give away lots. And so I've accumulated 5-6 lots over the years that I got for free.
It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know that much about Elon, but it sounds like you right time in a market that started growing. Like the market started growing. There was a period where there was probably, I'm just guessing, where it didn't move for a long time. And obviously you were coming off of like the foreclosure crisis, right? 2007, 8, 9, 10, things were starting to improve in 2010. But I I'm just guessing. Is that what the market was like? Was it kind of stagnant for a while, and then growth came to the market?
Yeah, the growth was very limited, kind of coming out of that 08, 09. It was starting to recover some, but it was not growing like it is today. And so I got in at the right time. So there again, I got in on pennies on the dollar compared to what stuff will go for now. But I tell people that you can still get some of these same deals today. You're not going to get them obviously as cheap, but also rents are way higher than what they were whenever I bought these properties too.
Yeah, it's just the reality of where the industry. It's all perspective, right?
Right.
100,000 10 years ago was very different than 100,000 is today. It's just that it's just inflation, right?
Right.
Inflation plays actually helps us as owners of assets, and that's the thing a lot of people don't understand. Is like if you're an owner, if you control it, um, you're keeping pace, right, with inflation, and uh, and hopefully, if you're in a growth market, you're outpacing. You're outpacing it.
That's right.
So right time, right knowledge, right mentor, right banker, right. A lot of it is like you put yourself in the path of opportunity because your mind was thinking about it. So what are you doing now? Like what you're a decade in. You just got done writing a book. Like what inspired you to write the book, and where do you see yourself over the next 10 years?
Absolutely. So this all kind of come about, during COVID. And so um, my parents always told me, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And that rings so true even today, certainly in real estate. And so, I have the bucket of rentals there. I flip houses now. I flip about 10, 15 houses every single year. And now I loan money. And so now there's really multiple income streams just in case, like COVID happened. There was of course a time where you couldn't evict people, because everything that was going on, and so that's a scary thing to think about.
Oh
Well, hey,
yeah.
I got all these expenses, and if my tenants don't do the right thing, I could be in a lot of trouble. But it started getting me thinking about, all right, what's next? And so I had several different realtors and several different investors say, you know what, people want to know what you know. There's so many new investors and new realtors in this business, and you have so much knowledge. You really need to kind of put pen to paper. And so I thought about two different things. One, a company that I did launch called SOARX Consulting, where I have a program that's an extension of the book that really kind of deep dives and helps people get into this great business called real estate. And then number two, the book, The New American Dream, A Simple Roadmap to Purchase and Investment Properties, because I wanted to give back. And so I think about what got me into this business. And if somebody didn't, put their effort into molding me, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Hmm.
And so I believe nobody gets to kind of where they're at on their own. I mean, they got a tribe of people around them, family, friends, mentors that really kind of help them get to where they want to be. And that's really kind of my next thing. That's what I want to do next is looking back and to pay it forward and to be able to kind of help that next generation get into this business and have some success. Because I don't want people to think, well, you have to have money and be well connected to have success. I want people to have the answers where, they can be successful in this business.
Are you going to continue growing your portfolio, or are you going to kind of keep it where it's at, stabilize it, lend money, do more fix and flips? I'm
I
curious.
think for me, the rental part, I'm very happy with where I'm at. And
Hmm.
so I think that probably kind of somewhat stays where it's at. And I think the flipping part and the lending money part grows a little bit more. Of course, you got to play the Uncle Sam game, right? So, like, if you got to buy a property, you have to buy a property, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But I think I start growing the other aspects, and then certainly grow the business coaching and the book portion as well, where I can then give back, to so many people that have certainly helped me.
I love that. Where did you come up with the name of your consulting business?
So SOARX, so I'm a pilot, so I have my private pilot's license, and so I love kind of flying. And so when I thought about the name of SOAR, you're soaring to X marks the spot, but SOARX is all capital for a reason. And so the S is kind of the beginning, the X is your destination. But for me, it's about not where you start, not where you finish, but everything in between.
Mm,
because I think that if all you cared about is where you're going, you're going to miss out on all the blessings that are
mm,
right in front of you. And,
mm-hmm.
I don't do this business just to be able to, one day if I have kids and stuff, just to hand it to them. I did this business because, hey, I want to enjoy life too, right? Everybody works really hard. I want people to enjoy the fruits of their own labor. And so that's where the namesake of SOARX came from. I
Got
want
it.
people to be able to soar to where they want to go.
I love it. Are you managing your own properties, Stephen, or do you have a third party management company?
So I own a rental management company. Actually, this past year, we just went 100% virtual.
Hmm.
And so I have virtual property managers that manage everything. We no longer have a brick and mortar building anymore. And it's been great. I'm telling you what, I can work from wherever. We have a higher percentage rented. We have a higher percent of money coming in. Everything's done virtual. We have the tenant portals. They handle all that. And then we do have a ground team that certainly goes and they handle the different ground stuff. But putting lock boxes on doors and doing maintenance and stuff. But it has just been great. It really has been.
What got, because that was obviously an operational change in your business, right? Um, Changing operationally is never easy because it's new
Right.
skill sets and all the rest. What Why did you decide to do that? What was the pain that made you decide to do that? And is your virtual talent onshore or offshore to help you with the management of your
Yep.
assets?
So really during COVID, I think COVID taught us a lot where, sometimes you don't have to be in person anymore to get the job done. And so I started thinking then, I said, you know what, like if there's a way that I can do that, I can save, we own the building, but I can rent out to someone else. I don't have a power bill anymore, water bill. My expenses would be a lot more controlled. But I also wanted to be able to take a step back where I wanted to be able to kind of get into these other fields, and so it just made sense. And so my talent's actually offshore, um, and it's great. Nobody even knows they're offshore. They speak great English, and I mean, you just would never even know. Our phone system's set up that way. Our tenant portals are set up that way. They have no idea. And the great part is, you're right. There's so much work that goes into that. But I said, you know what? I want to give them all the answers of how I would handle certain situations. And so literally I typed out, here's situation 1, 2, 3, 4. And I mean, there was hundreds of different situations. And I gave them an answer on how I would handle that situation.
Wow.
And so that's been the key part of me being able to really to kind of take a step back and do more of the flipping stuff and the loaning money stuff. They already know what I'm going to tell them about how to handle certain situations. And so it empowers them to make the decision themselves because they already know what I'm going to do. And so I have less expenses every month now that I'm virtual, and I make more money now
Yeah.
since I'm
Yeah.
virtual. I mean,
It's a great combination, right?
yes, it is.
It's a great combination. You know, we have built out a virtual property management company, and I shouldn't say we. My business partner, Thomas, who was my director of operations, 3 years ago, kind of said, "Hey, I need a new opportunity. I'm burnt out of the director of ops role." And we looked at a couple different businesses and third party property management. Obviously, they manage our portfolio, but we manage a portfolio of other people's properties as well. And he's like, "I think I can operationalize this whole thing with offshore talent." And so it's getting the right software system in place and training and developing the right people and having just like you said, a portal where they can get all their questions answered, and everything is seamless, but it's not easy. And so
Right.
like, so Steven, I would imagine, and this now makes a lot of sense. If you're a pilot, pilots require processes and procedures, right?
Yep.
And you need to be good at following processes, procedures, and you need to be able to build processes and procedures, right? So what I want you guys to hear is that, like, this is a business. It operates like a business, and he's got systems, he's got policies, procedures, checklists, right? He's all about X getting you, or S getting you to X, right? And so as you're building your investment business, you have to think like an owner, like a business person, as opposed to a highly paid self, self-employed person, which nothing wrong with that in the beginning. But at some point you have to put your big girl pants on and say, hey, I'm
Right.
going to run this like an owner. Right.
That's
And
right.
that's a different skill set. It's a skill set that a lot of people have to go and learn, I believe, because they always feel like they could do it themselves. So they just work their asses off and they
Hmm.
get stuck, right? They get stuck there. Do you have any
Yep.
words of advice around doing this?
Absolutely. You have to, it goes back to one of those things you got to get out of your comfort zone a little bit, because whenever I did it, I was very hands on in the business. And so, you can kind of use a term of micromanaging, right? You want to be a part of every single decision and that sort of thing. But if you want to be more hands off and you want to get virtual, I promise you will not be a part of every single decision. So you got to have policies and procedures in place. There's another thing when you hire the talent, they're going to ask a bunch of questions up front. But if you train them right up front, they'll have all the answers that they need, or the majority of them. Obviously, I still check in with them every single day, and for different things. But then also don't micromanage it. So if they're asking you a question that's in your training guide or in your training modules or a part of the process they already know, say, hey, go look for it. Because if you let them shortcut it, they're going to shortcut it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to kind of train your talent, just like you kind of have to train your
The
tenants.
tenants,
If
100%.
if you're fine with your tenants paying on the 15th, 20th of the month, I promise you they're not going to pay on the first. And so it's one of those things too. It has a few growing pains, right? It's with anything. It's just like a little kid. As the little kid grows, you're continuing to teach the little kid. Eventually, the kid becomes a man, or an adult, but there's growing pains. And so you have to embrace that. You have to lean into it and trust the process. If you don't trust the process and you second guess what you're trying to do, you're not going to be successful at it. You have to be able to trust your different policies and procedures and be open to changing those policies and procedures if they're not quite working. And that's what I had to do. We've never done the virtual thing before. I've done it now a year, or I guess a year would be May 1st. And so we had to change a few things because what I thought might work for certain things didn't necessarily fully work. And so you also have to be open to that as well.
For sure. I'm curious because you got me going down the rabbit hole of training your tenants, right? That's so true. You probably have a handful of pieces of advice that you would give people as they're building their portfolio, things that you've learned along the way on the journey that are just, they're these small little distinctions, but they are wildly valuable when it comes to running and managing a profitable portfolio. I'm curious, what advice would you give our audience?
I think the one thing that I had to learn the most when I first got in this business is you have to leave your heart at the door. And so I'm not saying be a cold hearted person or anything like that, but I promise you, everybody has a story. Everybody has an excuse on why they can't pay rent or why they don't need to be evicted or whatnot. And if you get sucked down that rabbit hole of always saying, you know what, I feel bad for this person, you know what, I'm just going to let them stay for free. One, you're not going to make any money. And two, if you do enough of that, you're going to be out of the business pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I really had to learn was tenants will tell you any and everything that you want to hear to try to prolong the eviction process or prolong them not doing what they're supposed to do. And so one thing that I really had to learn is turn the switch on and off. And so I'm a very kind-hearted person, big heart, love my family, love my friends. But when it comes to tenants, it is a business. And the way I look at a tenant not paying rent or a tenant tearing up a property is they're stealing money from me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they don't pay rent, they're stealing money because guess what? If they owed me $1,000 this month, they're not paying for what the goods that they're getting. It's no different than going down to a local convenience store and walking out with a Diet Coke. You didn't pay for those services. And so with me being able to do that now, it makes life so much better because back then I felt bad for so many people. And it's like, well, hold on. I feel bad for them. They don't feel bad for me. They're not paying the rent. They're tearing up the property. Like, no, we got policies and procedures. You got to go for it. You got to go by it. Treat it as a business because that's what it is. You can be compassionate. You can feel for people. And so for me now, especially with evictions, we give people by a certain date. Doesn't matter what story you give us. If you haven't paid by a certain date, we're filing eviction. Now, that's not to say that, okay, we filed eviction. This is what you owe us. You owe us for the court costs. You owe us for any other fees. If you get it called up before the process continues, we'll let you stay. We have no problem doing that. So I'm very firm up front. We're compassionate on the tail end, but then there again, it's still within the realm of what our policies and procedures allows us to do. And we do not make an exception for anybody.
Yeah.
If you start making exceptions for people, you will lose money, and you will lose a lot of money very quickly.
Yeah. It's sound advice. When do you rent is due rent is due on the 1st. It's late by the 5th, I would imagine.
Yep.
When do you file?
We normally file somewhere between the 10th and the 15th of the month. It depends on the month. So I've deep dived into when the court docket changes. And so I want to make sure that, if it changes on a Tuesday, I want to make sure my eviction's in or on a Monday. So maybe one month I'm filing on the 12th of the month, and maybe one month I'm filing on the 14th, because that's when that Monday date hits. Mm-hmm. But I want to make sure that I don't miss another court date. And so that's another advice I would give to people. Know when your court dates change, because most government agencies, most clerk of courts have a certain day of the week that it turns to the next week. And so I also try to incorporate that in. So somewhere between the 10th and the 15th, depending on what day of the week that day falls and what day of the week the clerk's office actually changes the court date.
Got it. Sound advice. As you're telling the story, I'm recalling all of the exceptions I've made through the years, and every single time it's bit me in the ass. Right.
Yep.
Every single time.
And another thing to dive just a little bit deeper, every person I have ever helped out, like that I bent the rules on, I promise I was the one that ended up getting screwed in the end. Mm-hmm. There's not one time that I can say, you know what, this person gave me this elaborate story and did exactly what they said they're going to do. I don't have one story to be able to tell of that. And so that's why I tell people, go by your policies and procedures. You never can go wrong. You can always, once the eviction process is started, you can always let them stay once they pay it up, because you don't have any money out of your own pocket as long as they pay their fees and stuff. So I want to make sure people know that, it's compassionate, but at the end of the day, it is a business.
It's a business. Well, I love the analogy that if they're not paying, they're actually stealing from you. It brings it right. It brings it right home for sure.
That's right.
Well, Stephen, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, do they find you on social media? What's the best website? How does our audience reach you to learn more?
Absolutely. So I do have a website, SOARXconsulting.com. So that's SOARX consulting.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. If you search SOARX Consulting, it will come up. Also, my book is available on Amazon. If you there is a link on the website, but also if you just go straight to Amazon, you can find it as well. You type in The New American Dream by Stephen Andrews, and it will pull it up. You can also...
I'm curious, Stephen, why did you call it The New American Dream?
Yep. So The New American Dream got its namesake because I believe there's a little bit of a change in what people's American dream really is. And so when I thought about my parents, when they were growing up, the American dream was, hey, I want to own the property I live in. Mm-hmm. And so now there's a lot of young people, younger generation, that doesn't necessarily want to own their own property, but they want to own rental property. Mm-hmm. And so they don't want to own their own property because they want to move around and they don't want to be tied to one location, but they also want to own rental property. And so that's kind of where the namesake came from. The New American Dream tells you that, you know what, I might rent, but I'm also going to be a landlord.
You're a nomad.
So I don't necessarily fully agree with that. I think you should own where you live, but there are a big part that wants to be a part of this, that care more about owning rental property than owning their own property.
Yeah, for sure. No, I've met a lot of them, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much for sharing time with our community. We're on a mission to help people become owners. We're on a mission to help people take this active income and convert it to passive income. It's a journey, it's a process, and you pouring into our community is greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me as well. I had a ton of fun today.
Thanks, brother. Take care.
You too.